Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from 2 Point Capital Management, an investment firm creating custom portfolios of stocks and bonds for individuals and institutions. 2 Point is dedicated to managing risk in good times and bad. 2 Point Capital Management, life opens up.
From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made last week in Washington when King Charles III made a royal visit. He was feted with a lavish state dinner. He met with President Trump. He addressed Congress. In that address, he talked about strengthening the U.S.-UK alliance, defending democracy, and addressing environmental crises. And he said, quote, "The challenges we face are too great for any one nation to bear alone," end quote. King Charles focused in his speech to Congress on the Magna Carta as the foundation for the rule of law and for checks on executive power. But a number of historians have noted that Charles did not mention the Charter of the Forest, a lesser-known document, but perhaps just as important as the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta focused on the rights of barons. The Charter of the Forest was for the common free people, and it established their right to use land, to get fuel, to find food. Kings didn't like it, and some fought it. And these days, some environmental leaders say it's more important than the Magna Carta. All of which assumes that you find King Charles a relevant figure. Maybe you don't. We've had conversations on this program in the past about whether the British monarchy should still exist at all. The British people are divided on that question. Meanwhile, the White House social media accounts have had some fun with the king's visit. One picture they posted shows Trump and Charles laughing heartily. The caption for the photo reads, "Two Kings." This is undeniably a finger in the eye of protesters who have attended No Kings rallies in this country and around the world. This hour, a conversation on the significance of King Charles's visit. And my guests include in studio Colin Coffey, who is a Brit living in Rochester. He's the owner of Renewing Massage and was telling me now he's now spent more time in the United States than the UK, just barely.
Yeah.
Well, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
It's nice to see you. And you have dual citizenship now, is that right?
Yeah, I've got both citizenships and 32 years in the United States and 28 years in the UK growing up.
Not to date yourself. It's great to see you
Yeah,
again, Colin
sorry.
Coffey. Peter Linebaugh is on the line with us. He is a scholar and author. A number of books relevant to our discussion today, including Stop Thief, The Commons, Enclosures, and Resistance, and the Magna Carta Manifesto, Liberties and Commons for All. Peter, thank you for making the time. Welcome to the program.
You're welcome. Good to be with you.
Colin, let me start with you as the dual citizenship and the Brit in the room here. Did you watch King Charles, any of his speech to Congress, any of the proceedings? Were you interested?
I saw a little bit of it, but then when I received your invitation to come here, I watched the whole thing on C-SPAN. Yeah, I was like, okay, I'll look at it. It was very interesting. Most of the people I know just saw the little clips. So, yeah, I thought it was a very fascinating event to watch. Especially because he referenced his mother making an announcement, a speech to the joint session of Congress.
That's right.
1991. So I remember him saying it's a different world. In his perspective, he thought it was a much more dangerous world, which is kind of interesting. Because 1991, I think, was just pretty much the Soviet Union collapsed. Millions and millions of people in Eastern Europe were free from the communist yoke. And it was, who knew what was going to happen with all of the Soviet Union's nuclear weapons? And of course, we grew up, if you grew up in the 60s and 70s, the fear of nuclear war was very real.
Oh, yes.
So I was like, some ways I think things are, at least I don't wake up wondering if the whole world's going to get blown up.
Okay. I guess that's one in the column of progress, I suppose.
Yeah.
Although I worry about that, but I'm a little younger than you. So, Colin, do you find the monarchy still relevant?
I think that it's very interesting because, when King Charles came here, he came as head of state. He also came as commander-in-chief. But he came to represent his elected government. So he says what, Keir Starmer's Labour government authorised him to say, obviously within the confines of the mission, which is soft power. And strengthening ties with the United States, which are based on business. Prince Charles, I think, King Charles, said that, British investment is absolutely massive in the United States. I think $1.3 trillion investments in 30 different states. And all of the bilateral security cooperation, the Five Eyes, of the English-speaking security forces across the world, Canada, Australia, the UK. I'd kind of forgotten about a lot of that. And those relationships go back, as he said in his speech, decades, no matter who was president or who was king. And plus as well, I remember King Charles was at one point, we were all told that he was going to destroy the monarchy because of his affair with Camilla, now yes. Queen Camilla. So it's interesting to watch it as an older person going, it's funny how things change.
And before I turn to Peter, just let me also ask you, there's always a little bit of hubbub about who shows up with whom. Rory McIlroy, one of the most famous golfers in the world from Ireland, attended the state dinner with King Charles and took a picture with President Trump. And a lot of Americans who don't like President Trump thought, oh, well, do I have to find some opprobrium toward Rory McIlroy now? And then his team had to come out and say, well, no, he also attended a state dinner when Obama was president. And when you're invited, you attend. Now, the British people, Trump does not have a high approval rating in the UK. Are they annoyed to see the king and the president laughing together, or do they understand that as part of international diplomacy?
I think that the British, the odd thing is that the British Prime Minister at times has rivaled the disapproval levels of President Trump.
I think that's right.
Recently. So that's a sort of paradox. I think the feeling was people didn't want King Charles to go because of the president. Asked a friend of mine from high school that I've known since we were 11 what she thought. She said, well, we can't have a special relationship while there's a President Trump. So there's a real antipathy that's there. However, I think the polling after Charles's visit was actually very positive. I think King Charles is doing better in terms of net approval than Keir Starmer is.
Right now, he's got a 60% approval rating from what I've seen.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think Keir Starmer's at 60%.
No, he's in the hole.
Yeah, yes,
badly.
Indeed. Peter Linebaugh, I want to establish, first of all, that you're a scholar and an author on many subjects. You don't style yourself a monarchy expert, but at the same time, you attended a coronation.
No, I'm an opponent of monarchy.
Okay, an opponent of monarchy.
I am a Republican. Yeah.
Okay, but you attended a coronation in the past, didn't you?
I did. I attended the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II as a schoolboy in London. We were forced to go out and wave at her as she passed by. And at my school, there was only one other person, and that was a Jewish boy and myself were kind of the outsiders. And the photograph recording the event shows us both, scowling away. So that is 1953. That's a long time ago. But I should tell you that my own anti-monarchism goes very deep into English history, not just, 100 years ago, but 400 years ago, to the struggle with the levelers and the diggers against kingship in favor of what we would call now democracy. This is the tradition that I come from. But nevertheless, I'm happy to be with you. It's very interesting to listen to you and to hear Colin speak about Charles. And I'd be happy to talk further about the Magna Carta and its sister, the Charter of the Forest.
Yeah, indeed, because as I mentioned, Peter, at the outset here, I'm probably like many people. I was aware of the Magna Carta, of course, I was not aware of the Charter of the Forest, and my quick study tells me that the Charter of the Forest does seem to be more for the commoners, the Magna Carta for the barons, and the Charter of the Forest, it irked the kings and the royalists of the time because they wanted almost total control of the land. It even abolished, I think, the death penalty for killing a deer or eating venison from land, because the word forest doesn't just mean trees. It means usable land in a number of different ways, including trees, perhaps. So can you just, first of all, describe what the Charter of the Forest is vis-a-vis the Magna Carta, and then we're going to talk about what King Charles, did and did not say last week.
Sure. Let's see where to begin. I'm just thinking of King Charles, and he wrote and signed and sponsored something called the Terra Carta, or the Carta of the Earth, Charter of the Earth. So I want to put that right away, that of course he's an environmentalist, and since President Trump has really eviscerated the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States, I find Charles's work all the more helpful within the context of the Anglo-American, ruling class. But getting back to the Charter of the Forest, yeah, you're quite right. It was against the death penalty for the killing of a deer. Magna Carta is not just for the barons. Though on the whole, they are the ones who negotiated with the king, but they were forced by peasant and plebeian demands within the cities and countryside, the towns and countries of England, to, like in Chapter 7 of Magna Carta, provide for the widows' estovers. And that just means the widows, having lost their husband, had access to estovers, or what's needful for fuel. More grandly, the Charter of the Forest, and by the way, throughout English history, one didn't refer so much to Magna Carta as to the Charters of Liberty. So it was generally in plural. And yes, the sister charter does provide specific powers to access to royal forests and to other privatized forests, or in their technical language, estovers, again, pannage. So you could always put your pigs into the forest to clean up the beech mass and oak acorns. And for a poor family, that meant, protein for a year, for the winter, having slaughtered the swine. And then chiminage, you could walk through the forest, and that power subsequently became a right, and is now, as part of English law, the right to roam, is still a slight vestige of an era before privatization, of commoning, we might say. So those three things, at least, I forgot honey, the sweetest part of the Charter of the Forest. So there are 4 or 5 things: no death penalty, estovers, chiminage, pannage, and honey, that are worth remembering. And of course, we don't just take it literally. Not seeking to go back to the Middle Ages, but we take these as symbols of mutuality, symbols of, that later become integrated with social welfare programs, which in English history were built historically often with arguments that look back to Magna Carta, to Charter of the Forest. Yeah, so I'm thinking of national health, for example, or I'm thinking of the nationalization of coal and steel, the 1940s, which I'm an older gent, but that was my childhood, was the post-war England and the rebuilding of London and the rebuilding of England after the bombings, the Blitz, and so on. So Magna Carta, Charter of the Forest has played a role. But nowadays, have King Charles come and address. I was very interested in Colin referring to the 1991 address by Elizabeth II, but to have her son Charles now come, how many, 30 plus years later, at a time that's also fraught, not with the fall of the Soviet Union, but with the world energy crisis, the world crisis of capitalism, which is threatening so much on the planet, then so to have a king who's aware of this is going to be helpful, one hopes.
Well, and so let me do a couple things. I'm curious to know, Colin Coffey, yourself there. I mean, I was not familiar with the Charter of the Forest until today, Magna Carta, of course. You grew up outside London studying. I mean, how much did you study on these documents as a young lad?
We were made aware of them. I grew up in a terrace street with co-joined houses, mostly with World War II veterans from Burma, veterans from the Pacific campaign, and also from Europe. And so we were very much, even though my parents were Irish, we were brought up to really respect the British sacrifice because we knew it. It wasn't on paper. These are real people, and it came on top of World War I as well. So this sort of environment where they love the royal family and they love the king during World War II, and then Queen Elizabeth, and now this acceptance of Charles. I've always had a deep respect for it because there is a long struggle to go back to what Peter was saying about the Levelers and the independents. There is a long connection between England, the English Revolution, which beheaded Charles I, I believe, comes way before the French Revolution. You always think of the French as being revolutionary. We forget the English are very revolutionary. They also provide with the pilgrims, if you like, the people who are on the Mayflower, were really independents. They believed in having a Bible and having the right, without a priest or a vicar or an established church, to have freedom of religion. And freedom of religion really stuck in the colonies and also in the United States. And it was interesting to hear Charles talk about his Christian faith and how the United States also has this Christian tradition and religious tolerance, freedom of religion, or freedom from religion also.
But let me push you a little bit, Colin, before I turn back to Peter. I mean, you say that you have a lot of respect for the monarchy itself. Is that fair?
I have a respect for the millions of people who have grown up with the monarchy. They see it part of their culture, which they're very proud of. I don't share that with two Irish parents.
Right, right.
But I grew up around it, and I can respect other people's viewpoints.
Oh, sure, of course.
Yeah.
As do I.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I understand how you see this, because for some, I mean, just looking at some of our email and some of the reaction to the extent that Americans paid attention to this visit, there is a curiosity that Americans have where they will look at King Charles, who is telling Congress that the power of a concentrated executive is dangerous. The power of a unitary executive, an autocrat. And what, if not an autocrat, throughout history have kings been? So I understand a king today is not the same, and it's, a figurehead. But does it feel
well?
Okay,
Evan,
hold on.
Go
ahead, Peter.
Let's just back off here for a minute.
Okay.
The king, the royal family is one of the richest families in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it is its landholding, its capital that it holds, it makes it a very powerful person.
Oh yeah, it is. Okay, so it is
family.
not just a figurehead. That's fair.
Right.
I think I use that term because because there is a parliament and there is a prime minister and there are elections, and it is, but the monarchy is not without power and is not without riches and concentrated power. Go ahead, Colin.
Well, to answer your
Right.
question, the first thought I had when I saw Charles give his warnings about concentrated executive power,
Yeah.
I couldn't help see the irony of it.
That's what I'm wondering. Does it feel
because-
hypocritical?
No, not for any of the reasons that most people are talking about, but for a very simple reason. That the House of Commons is a unitary system. It's elected. The House of Lords, your equivalent of the Senate, is purely consultational. The monarch can't turn back any laws passed by a majority in the House of Commons. House of Commons selects the Prime Minister, instructs the King as Commander-in-Chief on what he does, sets the budget. Compared to the United States has way more checks and balances against an autocratic rule by one party. You have the Supreme Court, which regularly strikes down things and changes things. You have a Senate that really you can't get much through without a 60-plus vote.
That's right.
The United Kingdom
We
doesn't
used to have a House
that.
of Representatives, too.
Right, okay, yeah. So I thought it was ironic that a hereditary monarch coming from a country that has a unitary system where one house decides everything comes to the United States and lectures the Congress and says, oh, well, let me tell you about separation of powers and how dangerous this is. But I think the thing is, it's all within context. And, the British monarchy over time, yes, you've got Magna Carta, you've got the enclosure movement, which was, taking what was common land and putting fences around it and basically stealing it. All of that happened, but there's a long struggle to constrain the monarchy, even into the 20th century. Whereas in the United States, I think your struggle has not been to contain a monarch because you have a constitution that embeds separation of powers. And the United Kingdom doesn't have that to the same extent.
So, Peter, did you find it either ironic or even irksome to hear the king lecturing Congress on the subjects that Colin just talked about?
No, not at all. I thought the Congress needs a lot of, and American citizens need a lot of lessons still to be learned about the history of political life, Anglo-American political life. And I do want to take my hat off to Colin's neighbors, back in World War II, who defeated fascism and who came from the Far East, the Burma campaign. These soldiers and veterans were very much responsible for the establishment of a renewed Commonwealth in England, with a Labour government that came after the war. And I also want to take my hat off to, I don't know Colin personally or his parents, but I do want to say that this weekend is a significant date in terms of Anglo-Irish history, because in May 1649, Oliver Cromwell, sought to invade Ireland, but a number of Leveller soldiers refused to go, and he had them shot. So this is really important, I think, for Americans to understand that the English class system is divided, has been historically divided, and much of the English working class will rely on Irish labor, on Irish leadership for its own political development. And of course, that's on the whole, that's Republican, where Republican means anti-monarchist, because, as Colin was saying, the monarchy had meant the enclosure, the landlords, and the Whig aristocratic ruling class of England. So that I think is important for us to remember on May Day, the Beaufort Levellers who were shot because they refused to go to Ireland.
Peter, do you let me steer us back just a little bit here to the address. Sure. And so King Charles does talk about the Magna Carta. As a historian, did you want to hear him talk about the Charter of the Forest, and were you surprised at all that he didn't?
No, I wasn't surprised because the condition, you will find the U.S. Supreme Court mentions the Magna Carta 189 times, which is a finding that I found too in my book, The Magna Carta Manifesto, in its chapter 9, which has to do with the Supreme Court and the Magna Carta, but never once or only twice in its whole history of almost 250 years does it ever refer to the Charter of the Forest. The Charter of the Forest was not, and its principles were not brought across the Atlantic with the Pilgrims or other Anglo settlers, or at least not to become part of the U.S. Constitution in a way that it had been as part of English traditional law. So I wasn't surprised at that omission. It's not one that I'm sure King Charles or his advisors will know of the Charter of the Forest and will have thought about it, but it's not central to Anglo-American law and hasn't been that way for a long, long time. I'm saying it once was, and it could be again, but that's going to be a struggle, and I don't want to do it just for antiquarian's sake. It's got to. Yeah. The commoners need to rise again. But what's happening now with Charles's speech is that he is asking Congress and Americans to see the autocratic nature of the U.S. presidency now. And that's the check that he's supplying. And it is deeply ironic that voice comes from a king.
Okay. Well, let me now just get a couple of pieces of feedback, a couple of emails from the audience. David in Ovid says, questioning whether the monarchy is still relevant is an American bias. The purpose of the modern monarchy is to provide a non-political symbol of the nation as a whole. It avoids having the country's political leader and symbolic leader be the same person, so one can oppose the prime minister and his or her policies without feeling or being accused of being disloyal to the nation. That's a real benefit. That's David in Ovid. Colin, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I see there's advantages. There's also disadvantages. The king isn't elected, whereas the president of the United States is, and he's not, and he or she, one day hopefully, he or she is not only elected by a popular vote, but an electoral college. And then we have the Senate, and we have the House of Representatives, and we also have, although the Supreme Court justices aren't elected, they're not just appointed. They do have to make it through a Senate confirmation hearing. So I think that there's a good breakup of power, but with the king is historically constrained. I mean, like when he talked about the environment or when he talked about NATO, he didn't sit in Buckingham Palace and make that up. He's given that by a career diplomatic service, which clears it through the Prime Minister's office. So he's saying he's not going to say something that his government wants him to say. He's very much constrained. So I find this idea in the United States that every king is a Romanov czar quite bizarre. Most kings have not had absolute power, not all kings. And if you compare Germany or Italy, there were 31, I believe, Peter, at Elizabeth's coronation. There was still a vast array of royals turning up because there were still remnants of all the royal houses that existed in Europe.
For sure. Especially, she married into it. With Philip and the Greek monarchy.
Yeah, and we also forget about the German monarchy. You know, it's only at the defeat of Germany in the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the end of World War One, when the United States finally tips the scales after the Russian Revolution removes the Romanovs and the Second Front that Germany had, that when Germany loses, Kaiser Wilhelm is forced out because Hindenburg and Ludendorff, I believe, who were heads of the German military, were running a military dictatorship by that point. And I think Wilhelm spent the rest of his life in exile in the Netherlands, a neutral country. So I think this idea that the kings are all powerful is this sort of very Disney-esque version of what history teaches us about kings.
Okay, and so let me ask Peter one question based on that point, and then here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our only break of the hour. I've got more of your emails to read for our guests. We have Peter Linebaugh, who is a scholar and author, and we've got Colin Coffey, who is born outside London, living in Rochester for about 3 decades. He's the owner of Renewing Massage in Rochester. We're talking about King Charles's visit. And Peter, I take Colin's point that, especially for Americans, our views of what a monarchy is in England, in the UK, in Germany, in Sweden, it is sort of cartoonish, and there is a sort of diversity of how much power, whether it was truly autocratic, throughout centuries. I take that point, but I want to ask you, as a scholar and author, the important point that hangs with me is what is a citizenry to do about a concentration of power? When does the scale tip to true danger? When the concentration of power, call it what you want, even in Hungary, where they just had an election and Viktor Orban was removed from power, he had been concentrating power. So it's not always the same, but what lessons do we need to hold with us as we evaluate the dangers of the concentration of power, Peter?
Well, let's just step back and think of the British monarchy and think of it as a constitutional monarchy rather than a tyranny or despotism. There's a long struggle, popular struggle, and even international struggle to make the king subservient to Parliament. You know, when Colin tells us that the civil service, the diplomatic corps, the House of Lords, the House of Commons, these are guardrails around the monarchy's powers of political and military freedom. That king is not the commander in chief. That when you referred to English kingship, or when Colin did, as Disney-esque, this is very significant. I mean, it has to do with the appearance of things. The king's head or the queen's head would be on the coinage. As everybody knows, and especially President Trump, he loves glitter. He loves gold. He loves the trappings and appearances of power. And royalty has been historically expert at these trappings of power, and I think the whole world admires that. But also, the whole world realizes it's a sham, in the sense that it's like a Disney cartoon or a Disney film. So, I mean, people buy into it, I should say. And I also want to, reiterate the point that the power that the king has is like in general, the power of ruling classes all over. It's no longer aristocratic or monarchical. It has to do with money. So what we're not learning is the king's relationship to banking, or the king's, and the same goes with Trump. Though the Trump presidency is it's more permissible to discuss it. With the king, not so much, unless, as I say, you're part of a Republican tradition. But having said all that, again, I want to say that this particular king, Charles III, it's important for Americans to begin to think about. Oh, but getting back to your point, the way you put guardrails up is by movement in the streets. So people may laugh at no kings, but they are not going to laugh when thousands of people shout no kings in the streets of the USA or of Turtle Island here. When there are hundreds, even thousands of demonstrations for no kings, it's a mobilization of common people, and that will frighten ICE. It will frighten the powers of despotism in a way that, I think what Charles is causing us to do is to think about our own relationship to power and to understand, are we a government of the people or not?
And on that note here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this only break. I've got an email from Charles, not King Charles, just a listener named Charles. And he has a note about no kings that I think both of our guests can weigh in on. And I've got a note from a Londoner named Dean who wants to weigh in on how King Charles' visit sat with him. Some interesting comments from a Londoner as well. We'll come right back and get that feedback on Connections.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Excelis Blue Cross Blue Shield, providing members with options for in-person and virtual care, creating ways to connect to care when and where it's needed. Learn more at excelisbcbs.com. And Mary Cariola Center, supporting residents to become active members of the community, from developing life skills to gaining independence. Mary Cariola Center, transforming lives of people with disabilities. More online at marycariola.org.
This is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. All right, Dean is a Londoner who says, I gotta say, it was the first time in my life I ever felt warmth to the king. I felt like it was an exhibition in how to rise above the gutter politics of today. It was like a scholar letting people know that, hey, we are linked by culture and values, and we are bigger than one man's whims. And on a personal note, I have my own fears about the value of a green card, and didn't travel solo for my brother's wedding, following some of J.D. Vance's comments about permanent residence not being permanent. I'm unsure whether to go for citizenship, or if that is putting my name into an area where I don't want the attention. That's from a Londoner named Dean. What do you make of that, Colin?
It's a very real thing. And a permanent resident you don't have legal rights. If you're falsely accused of a crime, and even if it's just dismissed, it can have devastating effects. So, I would say definitely the timing on applying to be a citizen is something that he'd have to look at very carefully. And it's, that's, I think he's right that, King Charles was able to get both sides of the Congress to stand and clap. I thought that was remarkable. He clearly elevated parts of the conversation. And I thought that was good. And I think it's productive to have a British monarch and talk to Congress. And I think with the special relationship, which I think we're going to get onto. One of the new British ambassador is Sir Christian Turner. And he was on a hot mic when he had a group of high schoolers visiting in the US, and he was asked about the special relationship, and he said a couple of things that were very interesting, and the Foreign Office said they were purely his personal informal views. Okay. He said the special relationship, quote unquote, is outdated, quote unquote. It's backward looking. If you look at why the term special relationship comes up, it comes from Winston Churchill when he comes over here in 1946, when he's kicked out and not re-elected as prime minister, and you get the first Labour government. He talks about the special relationship. Our current ambassador to the US says the relationship also has, quote unquote, lots of baggage. And his final devastating quote is, it's quite nostalgic. So I think that there's a lot to talk about with the UK-US quote unquote, is it a special relationship? Is it the same as it was at the end of World War II? Is it the same as it was at the end of the Cold War? There's a lot to unpack, and I think Charles kind of offered the opportunity for people to think about that.
No, that's an interesting point, and I've seen a lot of the comments of Vice President Vance and others. I wasn't, to Dean's point, I did not see specifically what he said about permanent status, but I understand the point, and I understand Dean's fear.
Yes,
and I understand why someone like Dean might think, I thought we were supposed to have a special relationship. How am I this fearful for my status in a place like this? So,
well, they never give special status to UK citizens. I mean, it's the same for a permanent resident from Philippines, Japan,
sure,
Brazil.
No.
Anyone in that status is going to have real concerns, and they're genuine.
Briefly, Peter, do you want to weigh in on the state of the relationship between this country and the UK?
Yes, I certainly do. I want to go back to the Atlantic when the alliance between the USA and the UK came to birth against fascism and the Atlantic Charter. And it was at a time when Franklin Delano Roosevelt enunciated the Four Freedoms, which was the backbone of the anti-fascist struggle. And these four freedoms are freedom from speech, freedom of and for religion, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. Those are the four freedoms that were the basis of the Churchill-Roosevelt. I mean, Churchill had to swallow it. He was not comfortable as a Tory conservative, but he needed the destroyers. He needed the might of the USA. And so that special relationship, an element of it, in the past anyway, was these four freedoms. And I am glad to be able to repeat them. Freedom of speech, of religion, freedom from fear, and from want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. Now, here's where the email from Charles comes in. Again, still nothing from King Charles on an email to connections@wxxi.org. But Charles, the listener, says, I'm having a lot of fun pointing out that the No Kings crowd all but ignored the presence of a literal king, with some even giving him a standing ovation. So Charles, the listener, is saying, if you really are about no kings, for the people who've gone to the No Kings rally, why weren't you holding a No Kings rally when Charles was here? Colin, do you think there's coherence in what do you see there, Colin?
Well, I think it's just a label. No Kings, I think, is about people being genuinely concerned about freedom and just using that expression. I don't think it's to be taken literally. I think there's way too much people taking what politicians say literally and repeating it. It was a slogan. I was really glad to see there were no signs. There was no one dragged out of that occasion. And people found from both sides something positive to applaud and listen to with respect.
Peter Linebaugh, if someone attends a No Kings rally protesting President Trump, is it inconsistent of them not to hold a No Kings rally when King Charles is here?
No, I quite agree with Colin. I want to remind everybody of the 250th anniversary of the separation of the two countries politically, and the key figure in that was an Englishman by the name of Thomas Paine, and he wrote Common Sense, and that really invigorated and led to the Declaration of Independence. But the line from Common Sense that I think we need to think of right now is as follows. The palaces of kings are built on the ruins of the bowers of paradise. So I mention this with respect, I hope, that listeners will bear in mind that the president now is building a palace for himself. is changing the people's house into this gilded cage, this palace. But Tom Paine asks us to remember that such things are built on the ruins of the bowers of paradise. That means on our accomplishments for a healthy life beforehand, for the earth and for ourselves. Yeah, so go Tom Paine.
Well, here's an email from a listener named Dallas who says, this is his observation listening to this hour. He says, it's funny to me that the British guest in your studio who came from a monarchy thinks our system in the United States is working. The American guest thinks that our system in the United States is a dictatorship. Peter Linebaugh, is that a fair description of your assessment of the United States right now?
Yeah, I think we live under a dictatorship of billionaires and of the capitalist class. There's no doubt in my mind.
Okay. Colin?
Well, that's a very standard Marxist view, Peter. I mean, it's like very familiar with it and understand where it comes from. I don't think that history has borne that out. I think the Marxist approach, the experiment led to the Soviet Union. It led to the oppression of millions and millions of people. The People's Republic of China right now, the second largest economy in the world, it doesn't really want a special relationship with anyone. I think Charles was right to point out one country can't bear the burden of fixing the world. And I think to some extent, there is a genuine, real, having lived here for 32 years and paid taxes here for that time, why should someone in the Republic of Ireland, for example, where my parents live, why should they pay nothing for defence at all? Nothing in World War II, nothing in the Cold War, and yet taxpayers in the US, we keep funding Europe, and it's nearly 100 years since that war ended. We've got 20 more years. How long do we keep having to hold hands? I think that, the US is a democracy, and I think that if we look at history and we also just look around at the world today, democracies are special. They have different characteristics. Power is passed peacefully. People lose elections. People win them. And I think we've become far too lackadaisical about that.
We had a president for the first time, Colin, in 2020, not agree to the peaceful transition of power.
Well, if that's the case, we shouldn't have had President Biden, and we did. So I think we've got to go from...
You're saying we survived it?
Yeah, I think we've got to look at facts, not feelings.
Let's
I
look
get
at
feelings
facts.
are important.
Leave it to you guys to have 3 minutes left to argue about Marxism. Go ahead, Peter.
No, I'm not here to argue
I know,
about
it's
Marx.
okay. Go ahead, Peter.
That Colin brought up that. It's a traditional red herring. I'm not talking about Marx. I'm talking about the billionaires. I'm talking about a rigid class structure, more and more like a pharaoh's pyramid, with slaves at the bottom, of unsure immigrants, undocumented workers, more and more incarceration, more and more detention on the bottom, while on the top are more and more, or fewer and fewer people with more and more wealth.
That's classic Marxism, Peter. Come on. Workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains.
Colin,
I don't know how you can...
You're quoting Marx, not me. I'm describing
You're describing Marx.
Now of artificial intelligence. If Marx saw the same, good for him. But what we want to do is see the world as it is now. And what it is this huge gap in wealth that I think our listeners surely are aware of. And
as am I.
We only need to think of the Gulf of Hormuz and of the petrodollars that are at rule in the economy. So, Colin, I have deep respect for yourself and your own traditions, but to begin to label me just as a crude Marxist and defender of China and the Soviet Union is a kind of red baiting.
No, it's just simply saying that your class analysis has been going all the way from Magna Carta to the enclosure movement, to the labor movement, to the levelers, to the independents, and to your assertion that what you believe is happening, and that is classic Marxism. It's
I'm
not
glad
popular.
you've been listening.
It's not
I'm glad
popular.
You've been listening, but class analysis goes back, I think, thousands of years.
No, because it goes back to the feudalism and then the Industrial Revolution. And it's the Industrial Revolution that's powered everything that we're doing today. The fact that we're here, we've got
Industrial
lights.
Revolution is a misnomer for privatization and mechanization. To transfer the word industry, which means resourcefulness, which means diligence, into this system of enslavement is to turn words upside down.
Now the music is going to play. And this is what I meant when I said, boy, we should have started this earlier here.
By the way, Peter, I do respect what you're saying, and I really enjoyed hearing everything you had to say.
Peter, thank you. Colin, thank you. Peter Linebaugh is a scholar and author. His books on, at least partially on the subjects we've been talking about, are many, including Stop Thief, The Commons, Enclosures, and Resistance, and the Magna Carta Manifesto, Liberties and Commons for All. Peter, we're grateful for your time. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
And Colin,
check out the London Hand.
there are more books, by the way. I picked two. He's got more. Colin doesn't have books, but he's got an excellent Rochester business, and I appreciate your time. Thank you for being here as well, Colin.
It's been a pleasure.
Who thought the King's visit wasn't going to get anybody talking? Here we are. More connections coming up in a moment.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Eben Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.